Imam Shamil was born in 1797, 1211 after Hijri, to a Muslim Avar family in Gimri, which is in modern-day Dagestan. When he was born, he was given the name Ali. During his childhood, he became ill, and following local tradition, his parents changed his name to Shamil in hopes that his new name would give him better health. He was frail and weak as a child, but he was toughened by a traditional Stoic lifestyle. As a child, he was taught Arabic, grammar, logic, and theoric, and was a very academically gifted student. His fellow students used to bully him. He would hide his wounds from his community, fearing humiliation and shame. Shamil's upbringing coincided with the Russian Empire's expansion into Ottoman and Iranian territories, sparking a fierce resistance among Caucasian peoples. The earlier leaders of this movement, including Haji Dawood, Sheikh Mansour, and Ghazi Mullah, had already taken up arms against the Russian imperial ambitions. As a childhood friend of Ghazi Mullah, Shamil would go on to become his devoted disciple and counselor, eventually emerging as a key figure in the Caucasian War, 1817-1864. After undertaking traditional education in his village, Imam Shamil set out to acquire more knowledge. At the age of 20, he has already traveled to Damascus and had gained a good amount of information about Islamic sciences. As a young man, his intellectual and spiritual pursuits were vast and profound. He had acquired prestige as a learned man. After this, he joined the Murids, which were a Sufi brotherhood. Under the leadership of Ghazi Muhammad, the brotherhood were involved in a holy war against Russia, who had formally acquired Dagestan from Iran. In 1832, Shamil was one of two Murids who survived the Battle of Gimri after being severely wounded, including a bayonet to the chest, and reportedly jumped over the heads of soldiers to escape, killing 3 of them before being knocked down. He pulled out the bayonet, killed the soldier who delivered it, and then leapt over a wall, disappearing into the darkness. After recovering from his injuries, he rejoined the Murids and led a quarter-century of guerrilla warfare against the Russians, earning a legendary reputation as one of the greatest commanders of the century. Ghazi Muhammad was killed by the Russian during that war, and his successor Gamzat Bek was killed by his own followers. Imam Shamil was elected to be the 3rd Imam of Dagestan. In 1834, he established an independent state in Dagestan. He enlarged his army made from Dagestanis and Chechnyans and led them to make raids against the Russian positions in the Caucasus region. He was able to unite the warring Caucasus tribes under the banner of Islam, unlike his predecessors who were struggling to do this. In 1834, Shamil established an independent state in Dagestan and strengthened his forces, leading them in raids against Russian positions in the Caucasus region. He implemented Sharia law and implemented significant administrative changes in the Imamate. These reforms included dividing the Murids-controlled land into provinces, each overseen by a local leader called an emir, who managed religious and social affairs. Regents were appointed to manage tax collection and supervise the Murid cavalry. Qadis, Islamic religious judges, were assigned to ensure security and report to the regents. He established madrasas in every village using treasury funds to educate the people of the Caucasus region. He also encouraged gifted students to pursue education in Islamic studies and literature instead of participating in jihad, ensuring the transmission of Islamic knowledge to future generations. Despite Russian expeditions in 1838 and subsequent attempts, they were unable to defeat Shamil. In 1857, the Russians decided to suppress Shamil, sending well-equipped forces under generals Evdokimov and Baryatinsky. Their military successes and Shamil's followers' exhaustion led to the surrender of many villages and tribes. After the Russians stormed Shamil's fortress at Vedeno in April 1859, he retreated to Mount Gunib. Despite Shamil's initial hopes for international intervention, his allies never materialized to aid him against the Russian forces. Following the Crimean War, Russia intensified its campaign against the Imamate, leading to significant territorial losses for Shamil's forces. Realizing the overwhelming odds against him, Shamil was forced to surrender on August 25, 1859. marking the effective end of the main conflict in the Caucasus. However, smaller skirmishes and rebellions continued to erupt in the region for several more years. He was taken to St. Petersburg, then exiled to Kaluga. In 1869, Shamil was granted permission to embark on the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca, and he set out from Kiev, then traveled to Odessa before boarding a ship to Istanbul. Upon his arrival, he was warmly received by Ottoman Sultan Abdulaziz, who invited him to stay at the imperial Topkapi Palace for a brief period. Later, the Sultan arranged for Shamil to depart on a specially reserved ship, marking the beginning of his journey to Makkah. After completing his pilgrimage to Makkah, he died in Medina in 1871 while visiting the city, and was buried in the Janatul Baqi. During his lifetime, he had multiple wives and 11 children. 163 years later, he is still known for not surrendering to the brutal Russian forces and fighting for the independence of his people. During military service, unmarried soldiers were prohibited from marrying, while married soldiers were denied contact with their families. Additionally, they were entitled to a portion of the spoils of war, and Imam Shamil's forces enjoyed widespread popularity among the local population. Imam Shamil's reputation as a powerful and principled leader preceded him, being respected by both friends and enemies, with his victories against the Russian forces generating widespread recognition and respect. Despite the brutal realities of war, Imam Shamil remained committed to building a new society governed by the Sharia, which he believed would be a beacon of orthodoxy in the region. He was seen as a reformer by many, as he sought to purge the Dagestani and Chechen communities of non-Islamic traditions and establish a new state that would be guided by Islamic principles.